Hey, what's up, YouTube? So I wanted to talk about breeding practices and the things that some of the myths. I want to say the myths of being able to successfully spawn your fish. Some of the things that people may say, and it may work for some people, um, But what I think, I this my in my opinion, I think it all depends on your fish, basically. Your fish, your situation, how often your fish decide, because ultimately it's the fish that decide that they want to breed. It has nothing to do with any of the other things that I'm about to mention. But I just wanted to talk about it. And if you are a fancier or hobbyist who use some of these practices and you have successfully been able to use these practices over the years and successfully spawn different types of or different species of cichlids or whatever you're raising, um, feel free to chime in. All right, so when people talk about successfully spawning, um, in this case, cichlids, um, being able to put two potentially mating pairs together, um, and instead of them killing each other, they are able to not only lay eggs but fertilize the eggs and successfully spawn the eggs. There's a lot of different. I don't want to call it myths. I'm going to call it. There's a lot of different practices that people said that they use, and which means that, or which they have been able to successfully spawn fish using these particular practices. All right, so in this tank here, I have two potential pairs. I have a pair. They supposed to be a bonded pair. When I got these guys, just before I got them, the breeder told me that they spawned. Um, just before he pulled them out, when he was pulling them out of his, he kept them in a tote basically, um, and so when he pulled them out, he noticed that there was some fry in there with him. Um, so I'm gonna go with that, meaning that they are a bonded pair because they have successfully spawned a pair. On this side here, on the left side, I have a young pair of Red's leaders who never spawned, um, pretty young in age, um, but they grew up together, and I decided to separate these two to see if I could get a spawn out of these two. All right, so we have a bonded pair here who has spawned before. Now, granted, they've never spawned for me, but they have spawned before. The male is there, and the female is down inside the little cave there. Um, and my male is here, and then the female is hiding behind that little brick there. So the reason why the females are hiding now because I just fed them, and then so once the last bit of food is gone, the males start chasing around the females, thinking that they try to scare them away, thinking that more food is going to come into the tank there, but no, no more food. See, you see, he almost daring her to come out. And there she is, right there. And as you can see, he'll chase her away, thinking there's food somewhere. He associate her with food. Let's see. Yep. Well, she stopped him from going into the pot there. Anyway, so one of the ways that people say you should be able to, or the things that they do, as far as being able to successfully spawn um, fry, or being able to have their pair spawn fry, is that they turn the temperature up in the water. Um, Sometimes it works for people. For sometimes it don't. My temperature usually stay the same no matter what time of the year it is. My temperature is usually around 82. Um, I try to keep it that way because they're tropical fish. I keep them in a basement. My basement isn't insulated, So it's usually cooler in the basement, no matter whether it's wintertime or summertime. It's usually cooler down here, so I usually try to keep the water between 80 and 82, I guess. So my water is usually pretty warm um, down in my tanks. Case in point, the water in this tank here, as you can see, 82. It is 82. Where the green is there, let me pull out. See how it's the green is lit up on that strip is 82. So that was pretty much spot on to what I usually keep my fish. Um, but yeah, so uh, raising the temperature up in your water usually spawn. That's what people say. Usually get your fish to spawn. I think that's a myth, but that's just my opinion. Also, feeding your fish bloodworms. Bloodworms. Give them a healthy diet of bloodworms. I do the same. I feed my fish bloodworms and blackworms, free dried. Blackworms, I feed them fresh, frozen bloodworms. Occasionally, without fail. My fish they eat it. But they don't. They're not spawning like rabbits. Covering your tank. Some people say cover it with duckweed. Put duckweed in your tank and let it cover the top there, or even covering it with like cloth or tarp or anything covering the tank, making the fish seem like they are, I guess, comfortable or safe or secluded with the darkness. Again, that's another myth. I can cover my tanks for a month out and come down to nothing. And the reason why I'm going over all of these because I tried all of these. I tried throughout my years of breeding fish. I tried them all, and one thing I noticed is when the fish are ready to breed, they're gonna breed, regardless of what time of the year it is. Prince and Prada, as a matter of fact, my lion's eye, their first time they bred or they laid eggs was probably in December, so it was in the wintertime. So being in spring, some people say in the spring they'll start spawning. Yeah, it depends, but fish will, they'll spawn whenever they're ready. All right, so spring, that's another one. People say, hey, in the spring I'll have this, I'll have that. My fish are more prone to spawn. It depends on the fish. It really depends on the fish. Another practice people say is keeping the lights out. So the lights in my tanks they're off way more than they're on. I try on the weekends because I'm home a little bit more on the weekends to leave the lights on for a few hours so my fish can get used to lights being on and I just prefer it that way because the lights are out. Usually I want to say 23 hours a day the lights are out because I'm not here. I turn them on when I'm home and hanging out with the fish, but when I'm not down here, usually the lights are out. Also, some people say, for some of the aggressive fish like this, maybe you put one on one side and the other on the other side, they'll spawn between the divider. Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. I think that's another myth. I got a pair on the bottom there. Leif, who has produced offspring, and Stallion, who, to my recollection, has never laid eggs before. And these guys have been together down in this tank down here, on the span down here. They've been down here for, I want to say, a good 6 or 7 months, probably longer than that. No sign of tubes dropping, no sign of eggs, anything. So, myth busted. Myth busted. I actually had Stallion in the tank with, when I first got her, I put her in the tank with Cosmo, and she was in the tank with Cosmo for 2 months. And tube dropped, but she showed no signs of wanting to spawn. Like tube drops, she kept challenging Cosmo, and to the point where he just got tired of her, and he got tired of fighting with her. So he was kind of being submissive. towards the end. So I knew that when he turned over to be submissive, that she would even kill him, most definitely, or damage him to the point where, I couldn't use him anymore. So I wound up pulling him out, and he became a happy fish again. But again, that myths, basically myths. All right, so I went over a few different, practices that people talk about, as far as spawning. I've also heard people say, hey, if you take some water from a pair that spawn, you take the water out of that tank and you put it into other tanks, the pheromones will mix in with the water and it'll get the fish to breeding. So when Prince of Pride bred last year, I did that. I took water out and I put it into a potential tank with that I had Lathe and Bitcoin in, and I put the water in. I cycled that water a couple times in there, and nothing. She never laid eggs. They never even looked like they was about to spawn. So again, it's just different. Like again, I said, it's when your fish are ready to spawn, they're going to spawn regardless. Whether they bonded already, or whether they hate each other, or whether they divide a tank, or whether you turn the lights out, or whether you feed them bloodworms or black worms, or whether you water changes. People say, hey, change the water, a few times a week. Same, that doesn't mean that they're going to spawn. These fish will spawn when they're ready. I haven't had a spawn since May of last year. I've had Prince and Prada in the same tank, the same conditions. I feed them the same black worms, the same bloodworms. Some people say, hey, starve them out. Don't feed them for a week, or, feed them less. Don't feed them every day. Don't feed them every other day. Feed them a couple times a week. So they won't look for food. They'll become comfortable with because you're not going in a tank. It's a lot of stuff people say, it's a lot. But I just wanted to, put my 2 cents in it. Again, your fish will spawn when they're ready. All of these practices that people say that they do, maybe it works for them all the time. Sometimes it probably don't work for them. The way I look at it is, again, they'll spawn when they're ready. I think the best thing to do with your fish to get them to spawn is make sure that they are in the condition where they can spawn. Again, we want to make sure they're together. That's the biggest part. Have them together. Let them, get used to being with each other, and when they're ready, they'll do that thing. If you want to feed black, I prefer to feed my fish black worms and bloodworms because I like the protein in that, and I like the aspect that that's something that they would probably eat in the wild or in their natural environment. So I do like to, introduce that stuff into their diet. The lights are always off because, again, they may feel a little bit more comfortable with the lights off. But I like to have the lights on because I want them to feel comfortable with the lights on as well. Like this guy, he was shy forever, right? I just kept the lights on in this tank for like a month straight. Didn't turn them out, And so once I divided it and put this pair on, he started coming out more, And he's out way more than he was before. So again, I think it's just up to the fish, and we just gotta leave it up to the fish. When they're ready, they'll spawn. But anyway, if you have any comments about what I said, or any practices that y'all guys have been consistently been able to use to consistently produce spawns after spawn without those particular pairs being a mated pair, feel free to chime in. Again, I try to use my channel for educational purposes, so we can both learn from each other, and other people who's listening and reading the comments can learn as well. But again, for me, what works for me is just by having by introducing the pair and just letting them be, just letting them do that thing. All right, this has been a long video, 15 minutes. I appreciate y'all guys' attention. Again, we can learn from each other. I try to share as much knowledge as I have, and believe me, I don't know a lot. I just, I do a lot of study, I do a lot of research, and then practice. And anything I learn, I try to pass it along. So I'm a sponge. I'm always willing to learn, and I'm also always willing to teach. All right. Enjoy your day. Thank you for checking out the fish. Thank you for listening to me. And then, I'm going to keep you on this journey to see which one of these two pairs spawn first. Please like, share, subscribe. Thank you for following Amphilopus, all things Amphilopus on Facebook, all things Amphilopus on Instagram. Peace.